everyone. Welcome to Designing AdobeXD. I will be your host today, Jessica Moon. I am one of the design managers on our XD team, and with me today, I have probably the most smartest, knows more about anything related to XD than me, person with me, which is our senior experience researcher, Lindsey Wallace.
Thanks, Jess. It's a pleasure to be here with you on this cool show that you do.
Yay! And I know we normally do stuff like show you the latest features and whatnot, and talk about a little bit about what we craft and how we did it, and show you some behind the scenes work. But we're actually really pretty much at the end of trying to get things ready, and you're all going to see it in pretty much a month in max. And so, in case you're curious what I'm talking about, and you probably already follow Andrew online, but on Twitter, but he basically has recently just posted basically everything we've worked on for the past couple of months, and his meme game and his GIF game is so good.
It is good.
Yeah, we were just commenting on it earlier. So if you want to see some of the stuff we're talking about, co-editing is one of those things that we've been working on for a very long time and is exciting, and it's a very revealing GIF that he posted that shows not just co-editing live, but a little bit behind the scenes around, some other things, such as why is there a third tab there, and yep, and how to go ahead and it's actually working. It's awesome. So some interesting things there on co-editing. This feature, by the way, went through a lot of work, not just in terms of concepting, but in terms of research. And I think it would be great to talk about it a bit today. And thank you for the compliment on the sticker, cars. This is like a little guy that has a really funny story, and maybe some other day I'll talk about the series. But a lot of us on XD Design have the random stickers of cute little guys. Another thing that we've been recently working on is blend modes, and that will be something that we'll see. Hi, Tim. And also we have something that we're calling Smart Layout, but interesting stuff here around some new features. Some people have actually, by the way, taken this GIF and they've taken screenshots and then de-blurred and added detail to understand what the new stuff on the PI is.
Oh, wow.
For smart layouts, such as literally here, where is it? Right there. I don't know if I can show. And people look at this part and they're like, what is that? And they're like, oh, it looks so interesting. So definitely I've been working on a lot of this kind of stuff, which is great. And then I just wanted to show how strong Andrew's meme game is, because this cat is hilarious.
It's a really good hovering cat.
Do you see the objects going behind there and just flying out in the corner?
Yeah.
But yeah, and then also if you're in the pre-release especially, you can test out multiple triggers. And this is especially helpful for emulating some really great prototyping experiences, which is especially helpful when you want to get that realistic feedback from users, So yeah, all really good stuff. And as soon as they hit your XD, we will definitely be unpacking and talking a little bit behind the scenes about how we came up with some of that stuff, some of the rules and some of the principles we had for it and whatnot. But great stuff. Anyway, on that note, a lot of this co-editing is really interesting, actually. I'm just looking at this feature because it was a long time coming. And what you're seeing in this GIF is not what we started with. And
no, we started pretty far from here.
Yeah, and I actually have not been on the team as long as you have, so just would love to hear a little bit about, I don't know, what that was like and what research, what role research had in playing in all of this,
Sure, yeah. So we started working on this. I started working on research for this about
a while back.
Yeah, a while back. I won't say how long, but quite a while. And it just takes, something like co-editing is pretty complicated because you don't need to just understand how one person works with the product, right? But how designers work with each other and what those relationships are like and who would be working in a file at the same time, and how they would want to work and their expectations around things like privacy and preventing somebody from messing up their work completely, and how
Right.
do you make people feel safe to work together in a shared space. So from a research perspective, there were just a ton of unanswered questions that we learned along the way, and a ton of like new information that we needed to have about how, not just how people worked with the product, but how people worked with each other as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it could be pretty straightforward in some regards to design something, right? A feature. So if you are doing co-editing, it could be pretty straightforward to, for example, like let people do whatever they want, or create like some sort of lock to prevent people from touching my stuff. Because, you know, if I'm working on an artboard and you're just mean, you can just go in there if I give you permission, and you can just move all of that stuff all the way around and just like never let me finish my artboard because you're mean.
Yeah,
so I think
just to torture you.
Yeah, just to torture me. And I mean, you know, figuring out how people work together and those unsaid things, and going out and doing some ethnography there and really understanding those different use cases is so important. And us determining how flexible our system is versus how much control you have in being able to allow things to happen, right?
Yeah, that was a big challenge. I mean, once we, you know, there's something like co-editing at a company like Adobe, there's just a lot of work to get systems that were made with a single person in mind to work differently so that multiple people can use them together. And so that was a really complicated research endeavor that we had to undertake.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, actually, so quick question back, just even higher level than that, because we are so, we make a prototyping tool, and so we test all the time.
Sure.
You know, how did you get into research? You know, what are some examples of things that people think about right now in the field? You know, what are tips that you would give people for those who want to, you know, incorporate research more into their workflows? And no, that's not beer.
No.
Cars.
LaCroix, some sparkling water, quality sparkling water. So how did I get into research, or tips, or how do you want me to start?
All of it, all of the above.
All of the above. Okay. How did I get into research? So my background is in anthropology. I have a PhD in anthropology. And so I really came to UX research from a desire to understand people, and to really also do work that had a much more direct impact than, you know, writing a book about something and then waiting years for people to read that book and understand it and all that kind of thing does. So UX research was a great kind of fit for me, because I love working in a collaborative way with design partners like you and the people on your team. Love doing kind of more high impact projects that change things, you know, on different levels, even from kind of the short-term projects to bigger, longer-term projects. And just a longer-term project at Adobe is just nothing compared to what a longer-term project in academia is like. I spent 2 years doing my dissertation research, and then years writing up after that. So even a big, long-term project here is a matter of months. So it's still much more immediate and gratifying than the work I was doing before.
So tell everybody a little bit about anthropology, and like what is that in like a little bit more detail, and then how did you carry that over into the field of like, you know, really creating user research for product design?
Sure, yeah. So anthropology at a very basic level is the study of people.
Okay.
A lot of people, when you think of anthropology, might think, first of all, of archaeology, which is the study of people in the past, right? So that is not what I studied. I actually studied living people, so cultural anthropology. I don't want to go too in the weeds on this, but basically the way we work in a business environment is one of our main methods for anthropology is ethnography, and you might have heard that word before, the ethnographic mindset.
Yep.
So basically, ethnography is a set of methods, but also a way of thinking about things. So the the methods include interviewing and participant observation.
Sounds very familiar.
Things like, contextual inquiry, just watching people do things and learning about how they do them. And then, what we bring back from that is what we call thick description or thick data, which is just really comprehensive, detailed observations and information about what people are doing and how they are working. And so that's really what anthropology brings, and also kind of a view that allows us to take a perspective that views people outside of just their immediate context and the broader kind of systems and stuff that they're working within.
Yeah.
So it was a kind of a shockingly direct kind of
totally.
transfer into this field.
I think sometimes like we get, what's really popular in the UX industry is being able to think of that happy path flow and then giving it to a user and validating whether from like a usability and from a mental model standpoint that makes sense. But like with like a thing like coding, for example, like it's not just about if they can get through and design something from start to finish with the user, right? It's about what is the context that they're in. It's just about observing them in their natural environment.
Totally. And then there's also really key differences between what people say, what they do, and what they say about what they do, right?
Yes.
And so understanding that those things are different.
Yes.
And then how to learn about those different levels of human behavior is really something that anthropology brings. And so co-editing is something where that particularly shines, right? Like people might say one thing about their desire to co-edit.
I don't want people to troll my artboards.
Sure, but then, they might do another thing, like,
right.
oh, I'm under a deadline and we need to be able to work together really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you ask them about it, they might say something else, which is like, oh, I really want to, my privacy is the most important thing, but in an emergency. Or, or they might say, I love co-editing, I love collaborating with others, but then never actually do it, right? So you might see all kind of different ends of that spectrum there. And I'm glad that Santiago finds anthropology interesting. I too think it is very interesting.
Well, do you actually have some stuff for people who are maybe interested in more?
I do. How do I?
Yeah, we can show you what's on your, Great. There it is.
Awesome.
Magic.
Yes. Wow. Amazing. So there are a lot of great resources if you're interested in learning more about ethnography and anthropology. So this is my favorite. This is an organization called EPIC. They run a big conference every year. And it's really, it's not just for user research, but anyone who's doing ethnography in any kind of industry. So it's cool because you get people who are doing urban planning and all kinds of stuff coming to this conference and having an opportunity to learn from each other. And they maintain an awesome library with just a ton of articles that you can search by tags and keywords, so you can see big data and analytics, collaboration, ethics, innovation, all of these kind of things. So if you want to find articles in this field, this is a great resource. IDEO has a lot of great articles and case studies and things to read through about how research has impacted their design process there. There's some great articles on Medium. So you want to be a design researcher if you're thinking about just getting the foundation, and this is really designed for career switchers. So I spend a lot of time talking with other anthropologists who are interested in learning more about UX, and so this is a great resource that I send people to all the time. And then Medium has a whole collection on design research methods, and some of these are really useful. And then LinkedIn has different groups of people who are interested in it. So, I think there's a lot of great resources out there. I love this article because the first tip they give you is meet people.
Oh, interesting.
And I think that is super important in learning about design research because we come from a bunch of different backgrounds. Like I'm an anthropologist, but the people on my team, some of them are psychologists, data scientists, sociologists, HCI people. So people have all different kinds of approaches to this topic.
Yeah.
And so, what I say is just one perspective. It's not all of design research works this way.
Right.
Talking to people who are doing the work is really interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, really cool. I actually noticed like two of those links actually reference something that I'm curious about, which is I saw research ethics.
Yeah.
So, and we were talking a little bit about some interesting stuff that you had covered in a recent talk or kind of thing that you gave around research ethics and risk, right?
Yeah.
What's that about?
Well, one of the things that we do on the research team is really help people understand the risks of the decisions that they're making and the implications for that. So, we are really great at asking why. And I think that concept of risk is really helpful because we think about it in terms of business risk, right? Or design and product, like what's the risk of launching this, and thinking about that. And so that's one way that research helps mitigate risks, right? If you learn about a usability problem or a conceptual problem before you've invested millions of dollars in building and launching
and
something.
Ship it, and you don't want people to come out with their pitchforks and say, what have you done? You've made my experience terrible.
Exactly.
Yes.
So we're really helpful in mitigating risk for the business and also for the user, right? So if you make an experience where you've maybe made some kind of decision to make somebody do something for a business need that's not aligned with their interests, they'll figure that out.
Right,
and then, you've put your relationship with that person in jeopardy. So
it's really interesting, right? Like as designers, we want to, one, internally fight against being married to our own work, right? Like very cool stuff. And so by the time we've gotten something pretty well thought out, it's pretty hard to have to put something out there and be vulnerable, knowing that it may be wrong, right?
Yeah.
We look for validation. We're like, hey, let's do this usability
Prove
test
all the
and
ways I'm right.
hope that everything's right.
Approved.
Yeah. But at the same time, we also all want to make sure that we're delivering like an experience for users that actually helps them.
Yeah.
And sometimes, even though we have a lot of solid thinking, they're like, getting it in front of people at the end of the day and showing that and seeing what makes sense is definitely important.
Yeah.
So
I loved Gayatri's question on here about what are some common mistakes designers make when working with design researchers.
Yes.
The biggest one is timing. That is the biggest mistake.
Tell me more.
That's actually sometimes how I start working with a new team is I'll get a last minute research request like, oh, this is something we're launching next week or next month. Can you go ahead and study it? No, well, maybe, but you might not want to hear the answer at that point, and there's only so much impact that research can have. Whereas if we start talking with our design partners when they come to us and they say, hey, I have this idea that I'm thinking about.
Right.
And we start working with them right from the beginning, like, okay, what are the questions we need to ask? Who should we be talking to? How should we study this along the way? Then we can have much more impact, and it's much less painful process. We are often in situations where someone comes and says, this is something that needs to come out in the next month, and I need a research study for this completed by the end of the week, and that's just that we can't do it because you have to, find the right people and talk to them and schedule. And so research is a little bit slow. Yeah. It can create tensions because I know product teams always want to move fast.
Right.
But, that's just, it's sort of a productive tension. And so the way we work around that really effectively is engaging as early as possible in the design process so that, we have time to conduct the research at a high level of quality and bring those insights into the whole process of developing the design, not just kind of trying to fix something, kind of half fix something at the last minute. So I'd say if you work with a researcher, if you're doing your own research, as early in the process as you can start prototyping or even just interviewing. Having a prototype's great, but you don't need a prototype to do research. You can just talk to people.
Well, I think I want to touch on something you said, which is really valuable, I think, is especially when you are bringing a researcher in early, I think that you guys ask amazing questions. And, I ask a lot of questions. I ask my team a lot of questions. But I think that the art of asking questions in and of itself is a skill. And it takes lots of years of experience to navigate through situations, contexts, how relative that is, type of people in the room, the kind of dynamics that happen when you're asking people questions. It's two ways. It's asking your users the right questions, but it's even asking the people who are behind this work and figuring out, are we thinking about the right problems? Are we thinking about this problem space from the right perspective, right?
Yeah.
So I think that having you guys come in early and ask those additional questions as you're figuring out what to research, even that's helpful.
Yeah.
So.
Well, thanks. Yeah. I mean, I think asking those questions is critical, and also just asking why do we think this is the right problem to solve, or how do we know this, or like when someone says like we're doing this for this reason, like okay, great, how did we get there?
Yep.
What were the things that what was the information that informed this choice? And that's really helpful. I always say that when I'm doing a study, half the study is studying the team that asked for the study to try and figure out both like what are their goals, what's prompting the study, and also like what's the question underneath the question, and what's the most effective kind of information we can bring back to those teams.
2 questions for you actually on that note. So as a designer, like what are some things that we can do to engage with you in the best way to make the most meaningful conversations? That's one question. And the second question is for those of us who aren't lucky enough to have researchers, which is a lot of people, honestly. What can these people do?
Yeah, so I think, there are some really simple things you can do. I think the best way to engage with researchers, like I always love it when designers come to me with questions that they already want to know, because that helps me understand. If they just come to me and say, I want to do a study about this, I'm like, okay, what's the question that what do you want to learn through the study?
Right.
And so somebody saying, I have these 3 questions that I want to learn about, then that's a great starting point for conversation. And I think for those of you working as designers without research, just bring that same question asking practice to your work, and try and advocate for time to test your products, or talk to people who are using your products, build in those opportunities to interact with users and ask those questions within your organization. I loved Mike Montiero had the framing of say no and ask why, and that's not always easy to do, but I think bringing those questions from a user perspective, like, okay, I understand the business problem, but what is the user problem we're trying to solve with this, I think is really helpful.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we are going to be having some fun stuff coming in Mac shortly around being able to better send things for user testing. And I'll just keep it that vague. And one thing that I think comes up a lot is like you're setting up the thing, you're setting up what you want to give in the, let's say like a usability test, right?
Sure.
And what are some best practices around how you set up this thing that you put in front of people? Is it always a prototype? Is it paper? Like I know you've done a lot of different things here.
It doesn't have to be a prototype. It can be a paper, it can be Post-its, it can be cards. We've asked people to draw maps. We've asked people to, organize things in different ways. You can use any tool you want, because your goal is really to learn about how that person thinks and what they're trying to do. In terms of using prototypes for presentations, I do like a paper or more static prototype early in the process, because I like to be able to sort of stop somebody and control their speed going through an experience, whereas with a clickable prototype, sometimes people just click, 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 and you don't get that same opportunity to talk with them. So that's kind of my bias toward paper.
Oh, interesting. They go through the task flow way too quickly sometimes.
Exactly, yeah, and they're just kind of clicking through, and I want to know, I want to have that opportunity to stop and talk.
No, I've definitely seen, especially in some of the reports that you've given, like pictures of people looking at actually a prototype that has been made but printed on paper.
Printed out.
And they're like pointing at parts of the UI, and they're actually taking the time to talk you through their mental kind of, thinking around what they perceive on paper rather than just like getting through that thing and being done, right?
Exactly. Yeah. But I will say, in terms of prototypes, it is really important to not have like hints and hotspots and stuff like that on any prototype you're using for research.
But what happens if they struggle?
That's the best part. I sometimes joke that my job is to watch people fail at using computers. It is not. That is not my job. But,
it is a part of the job.
It is part of the job because those moments of struggle really can teach you why somebody, that's where you dig in and say, like, what is it about this that somebody's struggling with?
Right.
Is it the wrong time in their process? Is it, and those are really productive. And also those are the most important things for us to see in research, right?
I see.
Because if you see them in research, you're less likely to see them later. So that's why I really want to take that time to go through that and see where those kind of struggle, painful moments are during a research study so that we can try and fix them. If we just hand wave over them, then they get fixed after something's released.
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting point. Like, we make these happy paths to tests to make sure that at the highest level people get through the happy path. But there's also things like, along the way as they get through each step, do they understand what they're supposed to understand? Are they familiar with their surroundings? Do they have the right information to make a good decision at the step after? And if they're struggling, why? It's not just about it's not just about oh, this person couldn't do it, failure. It's like, oh, this person struggled, or people with this type of background struggled when they were trying to do this task, and here's why, and here's how to fix it and how to improve it. And so that's really the kind of information we're trying to get from research. And Gayatri, what do you expect to happen? And I actually like to ask that question a little differently and try and ask what needs to happen here? Or what happens here even? Just what's the next thing that happens so that people, to really get the user to tell us what, from their perspective, is the logical next thing. Because what do you expect to happen? It's a good question, but people often feel like we're testing them. And we're not testing them. They can never be wrong, right? Yeah. We're kind of, if anyone's wrong, it's us. And it's amazing how much pressure you're under as the user, as the guinea pig, right? Yeah. To look like you're capable, right? Yeah. Even though that we have zero expectations there. And actually, this reminds me of a deck that you had presented to our team a little bit ago. And one of my favorite things about it was how important silence is in tests, right? And so if they are stumbling across a specific part of your flow that you made that they just don't know what to do, and just kind of leaving that silence there for them to really try to process that and unpack that. Right? Yeah, silence is the most difficult but most important tool that a researcher has, I think. That's that's one of those pro tips that not a lot of people remember in the scene, because, we're trying to have banter and casual conversation. You want to make the people comfortable in the room, that kind of thing. Even you as the facilitator, you want them to feel good. Yeah. And we do always really want people to feel safe talking to us. They're, as a participant in one of our studies, there's no way that they can be wrong. Right. Even if they're a beginner or they don't feel confident using the product, we want the products to work for people with varied backgrounds. And so, well, I know you're very explicit when you say this to people too. Yeah. You're you're never wrong. It's fine. You're fine. Yeah. So I want people to exactly, things we tell them to put them at ease. We always say you can't hurt our feelings. That always makes people laugh a little bit. It hurts my feelings on the inside, but I won't say it. Well, it doesn't hurt my feelings because I don't design any of it. So I really have that detachment, I guess, authentically. But you can't hurt our feelings. You're the expert. We're here to learn about you. Well, I think that's pretty powerful, saying that to a user who is unfamiliar with something and telling them they're the expert. I think that's very cool. That's very empowering. Really. Yeah, because we're there to learn about them, and how they feel about our products, but we really can't understand that unless we understand them pretty well. Well, and, we have 2 minutes. We have a bigger background, which means that we need to wrap up now. So, all right. I think that those are some pretty amazing tips. I think that obviously research is so important in us making sure that what we make makes sense and actually helps. Awesome. Our end users. Well, research wouldn't be anything without design, because nobody wants me designing anything. So we're lucky to have such great design partners that we can really, all we have to do is give you the information, and then you guys go out and make the magic happen. So it's great. Cool. Well, thank you for telling us all about you and all these awesome articles. Thank you for having me on the show. And, super fun. Always love to come and talk to everyone. So if you have any questions or anything, always hit us up, and we'll definitely post some of these links at some later time. But great. So thank you, and we'll see you next week.